Sometimes I wonder if modern life is making it harder for people to hear God, without them even realizing it. I think many people feel tired today in a way they don't fully understand anymore. Not just physically tired. Not the kind of exhaustion that disappears after a weekend or a good night of sleep. Something deeper than that. A quiet kind of exhaustion that slowly settles into people's minds, hearts, and even their souls. And what makes modern exhaustion strange is that life today is supposed to feel easier. Technology was supposed to save time. Entertainment was supposed to make people happier. Constant connection was supposed to make people feel less alone. And yet so many people feel emotionally overwhelmed all the time. People wake up tired. They move through life distracted. They go to sleep anxious. And somewhere deep inside themselves, many quietly feel disconnected from meaning, peace, and sometimes even from God. I think one of the biggest spiritual problems in modern life is not that people suddenly became evil or stopped believing completely. I think the bigger problem is that modern life became too loud, too fast, too distracting. Human beings were never designed to absorb this much noise every single day. Notifications, news, arguments, opinions, social media. Constant stimulation from morning until night. And after years of this, silence starts to disappear from people's lives completely, which becomes dangerous spiritually. Because throughout history, people often encountered God in quiet places. In silence, in prayer, in reflection, in stillness. But modern life trains people to avoid stillness entirely. The moment life becomes quiet, most people immediately reach for distraction. Their phones, a video, music, anything to avoid being alone with their thoughts for too long. And I think many people are beginning to feel the consequences of that, not only emotionally, but spiritually too. I honestly think many people feel spiritually exhausted today without realizing that's what they're experiencing. Because spiritual exhaustion doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it simply feels like emotional numbness, constant anxiety, difficulty slowing your mind down, feeling disconnected from life, even when everything looks normal on the outside. And I think modern life itself plays a major role in this. Because human beings were never designed to live inside constant noise and stimulation all the time. There was a time when silence existed naturally in ordinary life. People walked without headphones. Families sat together without screens glowing constantly in the background. Waiting rooms were quiet. Even boredom existed differently. And maybe modern people underestimate how important those quiet moments actually were. Because silence creates reflection. Reflection creates self-awareness. And self-awareness often leads people toward deeper spiritual questions. But modern life moves too quickly for reflection now. Almost every empty moment gets filled immediately. Music, videos, podcasts, scrolling, notifications, endless stimulation. And after years of this, many people no longer know how to simply sit quietly with themselves anymore. Silence begins to feel uncomfortable, almost threatening. Because the moment the noise disappears, people are confronted with thoughts and emotions they've been avoiding for a very long time. Their loneliness, their fears, their regrets, their spiritual emptiness. And modern culture offers endless distractions to avoid confronting those things. But distraction does not heal the soul. It only delays confrontation. Which may explain why so many people today feel emotionally exhausted, despite living in the most entertained society in human history. One of the strangest realities of modern life is that people have never been more digitally connected, and yet so many people feel profoundly alone. Millions of people interact online every single day. But interaction is not the same thing as closeness. Watching people online is not the same thing as being known. And I think many people quietly feel invisible now, especially older people. Especially people who remember a slower world. A world where conversations lasted longer, where neighbors knew each other, where churches felt like communities instead of places people occasionally visit. Modern life became efficient. But efficiency is not the same thing as meaning. And social media creates a strange illusion of connection, while often deepening emotional isolation underneath. People spend hours consuming the lives of strangers while quietly feeling unseen themselves. They scroll endlessly looking for stimulation, while internally longing for peace, belonging, and real human connection. And loneliness changes people spiritually, because loneliness affects hope. It affects prayer. It affects emotional stability. Sometimes even the ability to feel close to God. And I think this is one reason so many people today feel spiritually numb. They are emotionally overwhelmed, but spiritually undernourished. I don't think Christianity becomes less important in a world like this. I actually think it becomes more necessary. Because modern life constantly pulls human attention outward, toward noise, toward distraction, toward outrage, toward comparison. But faith pulls people inward again, toward reflection, toward stillness, toward prayer, toward peace. And maybe that's why so many people today quietly feel exhausted. Because the modern world trains people to constantly consume, while the soul quietly longs for rest. I think many people quietly blame themselves when faith begins feeling distant. They assume something must be wrong with them spiritually. But I honestly think modern life itself makes spiritual focus more difficult than many people realize. Because Christianity requires things modern culture constantly weakens. Silence, patience, reflection, humility, stillness. And modern life trains people in the opposite direction. Faster attention spans, constant distraction, endless stimulation, immediate gratification. Human beings were never meant to live inside this level of mental noise constantly, which is why so many people feel spiritually restless now. Not because God disappeared, but because modern life constantly competes for human attention. And attention is deeply spiritual. What people consistently focus on eventually shapes their inner lives, their thoughts, their emotions, their peace, their fears. I think many people today are starving spiritually while being overwhelmed mentally, which creates a strange modern emptiness. People consume constantly, but rarely feel fulfilled. Because the soul cannot be nourished by endless distraction. The soul needs meaning, truth, prayer, hope, and maybe most importantly, silence. Maybe that's why silence feels so powerful now. Because in a world that never stops talking, silence becomes sacred again. A place where people can finally hear themselves think, and maybe even hear God again. In a loud world, perhaps silence is one of the last spiritual refuges people still have left. Maybe that's what so many people are truly searching for now. Not more noise, just a little peace. If you've been feeling overwhelmed, disconnected, or spiritually tired lately, you're not alone. And if these reflections help you slow down and think a little more deeply about faith and the modern world, you're always welcome here.